Hey survivors, tonight we're taking you on a different kind of journey. No zombies, no apocalypse, just you and the raw, unforgiving wilderness. Before you settle in with your warm blanket and climate-controlled room, I want you to imagine something. What if all of that disappeared? What if you woke up alone in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the clothes on your back? The truth is, most of us wouldn't last 3 days. Not 3 weeks, not 3 months, 3 days. And tonight, we're going to walk through exactly why that is, step by painful step. Before we begin, hit that like button if you're ready to test your survival knowledge, and drop a comment telling me, have you ever been truly alone in nature? What's the longest you've gone without modern conveniences? I'm always curious to hear your stories. Now dim those lights, get comfortable in your safe, warm bed, and let's journey together into the kind of isolation that changes people forever. Day 1. The awakening. You open your eyes to green. Not the green of your bedroom walls or the glow of your alarm clock. Deep, living green that moves with wind and shadow. Pine needles carpet the ground beneath you, soft and fragrant. Sunlight filters through a canopy so dense it turns the world into an emerald cathedral. For a moment, your brain tries to make sense of this through the lens of normalcy. Camping trip? Hiking accident? Elaborate prank? But as you sit up and take inventory of your situation, reality settles in your stomach like cold stone. You're alone. Completely. Utterly alone. Your clothes are intact. Jeans, a t-shirt, sneakers that weren't designed for hiking. Your pockets yield a disappointing inventory. A phone with no signal and 47% battery, a wallet with credit cards that are now worthless plastic rectangles, $17 in cash that might as well be Monopoly money, and a house key that unlocks a door that might as well be on another planet. No knife, no matches, no water bottle, no map. Nothing that would actually help you survive in a place where survival isn't guaranteed. You stand up, and immediately the scale of your situation becomes apparent. Trees stretch in every direction, massive conifers that have been growing since before you were born. The forest floor is a tangle of undergrowth, fallen logs, and vegetation you can't identify. There's no path, no trail markers, no helpful signs pointing towards civilization. You call out. Hello? Is anyone there? Your voice sounds small and fragile, swallowed by the immensity of the wilderness. No response comes except the whisper of wind through pine boughs and the distant call of a bird you don't recognize. Your phone shows no signal bars, not one, not even the courtesy of a single flickering bar to give you false hope. The GPS spins uselessly, unable to lock onto satellites through the dense canopy. Your last text message, sent yesterday to a friend about meeting for coffee, sits in your outbox like a message in a bottle that will never reach shore. The first rule of survival situations is to stay calm and assess your resources. But as you turn in a slow circle, seeing nothing but endless forest in every direction, calm feels like a luxury you can't afford. Your heart is already beating faster, adrenaline flooding your system in preparation for dangers you can't yet identify. The sun is moving across the sky. You can tell that much from the angle of light through the trees. It's morning, maybe mid-morning. That gives you several hours of daylight to figure out what to do next. But several hours to do what, exactly? Pick a direction and walk? You could be walking deeper into the wilderness, further from help. Stay put and wait for rescue. Who's coming to rescue you when nobody knows you're here? Build a shelter. Find water. Make a fire? The survival shows you've half-watched while scrolling through your phone suddenly seem criminally inadequate as actual preparation. You check your phone again, knowing it's pointless but unable to stop yourself. Still no signal. The battery has dropped to 46%. Every time you check it, you're burning through power you might desperately need later, but the compulsion is irresistible. It's your last connection to the world of electricity and emergency services and people who know your name. A sound makes you freeze. Branches cracking in the underbrush, something moving through the forest with purposeful weight. Your city-trained brain immediately jumps to bears, wolves, mountain lions, every predator you've ever seen in a nature documentary. The rational part of your mind knows that most wild animals avoid humans, but the primal part that's just realized it's vulnerable and alone doesn't care about statistics.
The sound fades. Whatever it was has moved on or was never actually moving toward you. But now you're acutely aware that you're not the apex predator here. In the wilderness, humans are soft, slow, and remarkably easy to kill. The temperature's comfortable now in the morning light, but you can already feel the chill in the shadows where the sun doesn't reach. What will tonight bring? How cold does it get here, wherever here is? You don't even know what climate zone you're in, what dangers might emerge after dark, what basic rules govern survival in this particular ecosystem. You make a decision, though you're not sure if it's the right one. You'll walk in the direction the sun is moving, roughly west, you think, and look for water. Every survival show says the same thing. Humans can survive 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 hours without shelter in harsh conditions, 3 minutes without air. Water is priority 2, right after not freezing to death. But as you take your first steps into the wilderness, pushing through undergrowth that clutches at your jeans and low branches that snag your hair, you realize something that sends ice through your veins despite the morning warmth. You have no idea what you're doing, and the wilderness doesn't care. The long road back. 2 weeks have passed since your discharge from the hospital. You're home now, surrounded by the comfortable trappings of modern life. Climate control, running water, a refrigerator full of food, lights that turn on with a switch. Everything that was absent in the wilderness, everything you desperately needed and couldn't access. But being home doesn't feel the way you expected it to feel. You find yourself unable to fully relax. You check supplies compulsively, how much food is in the pantry, how much water is in bottles in the garage, whether the batteries in your flashlights are fresh. You started keeping emergency kits in your car, your home, even your workplace, water purification tablets, fire starters, first aid supplies, survival blankets, things you never thought about before but now can't stop thinking about. Your friends and family think you're overreacting. They say, lightning doesn't strike twice. What are the chances you'll get lost in the wilderness again? They left off this newfound preparedness obsession, this inability to take survival for granted the way they still do. But they didn't spend a night shivering in an inadequate shelter, listening to sounds in the darkness and wondering if they'd see another sunrise. They didn't feel their bodies shutting down from dehydration and illness, didn't experience the absolute terror of being completely alone in an environment that wants to kill you through simple indifference. You can't explain it to them in a way they'll understand. How the wilderness changed your relationship with the world. How it revealed the thinness of the membrane separating life from death, comfort from suffering, civilization from chaos. You've been researching in your spare time, devouring information about survival skills with an intensity that borders on obsession. You've learned about the rule of threes. 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in harsh conditions, 3 minutes without air. You've learned about fire starting techniques, shelter construction, water purification methods, edible plants, navigation without GPS. The Wilderness Survival course you signed up for starts next month. It's a week-long intensive in the same general region where you got lost, run by experienced outdoorsmen who will teach you everything you should have known before. Part of you dreads going back to that environment, facing the trees and the cold and the isolation again, but a larger part knows you need this. Need to return to the place that nearly killed you and prove that you could not just survive but thrive there. You've also started exercising, actually exercising in ways that build functional strength rather than aesthetic appeal. Hiking with a weighted backpack, climbing stairs, doing body weight exercises that improve your ability to lift, carry, pull, and push. Your body, which was so inadequate in the wilderness, is slowly being rebuilt into something more capable. But the physical preparation is easier than the mental adjustment. You have moments, increasingly frequent moments, where modern life feels absurd. The drama at work about meeting deadlines and office politics seems like children playing pretend. The anxiety about social media and what people think of you feels manufactured and pointless. The complaints about traffic, about restaurant service, about minor inconveniences that wouldn't even register as problems if you were still alone in the woods trying to survive.
Storytelling. You're developing what you can only describe as survivor's guilt, though you're not sure that's the right term. Guilt that you're safe and comfortable while the wilderness is still out there, still claiming lives, still indifferent to human suffering. Guilt that you only survived through luck. If Frank had taken his ATV instead of walking, if you'd collapsed somewhere other than the logging road, if any of a dozen small variables had been slightly different, you'd be dead. You found online communities of people who've had similar experiences, near-death survival situations that changed their relationship with normal life. Reading their stories helps, knowing you're not alone in feeling disconnected from the comfortable world of grocery stores and Netflix and complaints about Wi-Fi speeds. One story in particular resonates with you. A woman who survived 4 days lost in a desert canyon. She writes about how she can't watch survival shows anymore without getting angry at their unrealistic portrayals, how she keeps emergency supplies in every room of her house, how she has panic attacks in crowds but feels calm in wilderness areas that would terrify most people. The wilderness showed me who I really am, and I'm not sure I like what I saw, but at least it was honest. The person I am in normal life feels like an act I'm performing for an audience that doesn't even know it's watching. You understand that sentiment. The wilderness stripped away all your social performances, all your carefully constructed self-image, all the stories you told yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. What remained was a scared, unprepared animal trying desperately to survive an environment it wasn't designed for. And now, back in civilization, you're supposed to just forget that revelation? Pretend that the comfortable, confident person you show to the world is real, while the terrified, vulnerable creature from the wilderness was the aberration? You're not sure which version is more honest. Skills and knowledge. The wilderness survival course begins on a crisp October morning. You arrive at the trailhead with 15 other students, a mix of ages and backgrounds, all united by the recognition that they don't know how to survive in nature and want to change that. Your instructor is a woman named Sarah, weathered and competent, who spent 30 years as a wilderness guide, search and rescue volunteer, and survival instructor. She looks at your group with the practiced assessment of someone who's seen hundreds of students and can predict within the first hour who will take this seriously and who thinks it's going to be a fun camping adventure. She says during the initial briefing, most of you are here because you had a scare. Got lost, got hurt, got cold, got scared. That's good. Fear is the best teacher. People who come to these courses without experiencing real survival situations often don't pay attention because it all seems theoretical to them. But you know it's not theoretical. You know this knowledge can save your life. She's right. I recognize that look in several students' eyes, the same look I see in my mirror. They've been where you've been, felt what you felt, and now they're here to make sure it never happens again. The first day is fire. Not just starting fires, but understanding fire. What it needs, how it behaves, why it's the most important survival tool you have access to. Sarah demonstrates 6 different fire starting methods. Matches and lighters, the obvious ones, ferro rod and striker, bow drill, hand drill, fire plow, and even using a battery and steel wool. She makes each method look easy, her movements practiced and efficient. Then she makes you try. The matches and lighters are easy, almost insultingly so. Point, strike, flame. You've been doing this since childhood.
though you've never fully appreciated the miracle of on-demand fire until now. The ferro rod takes practice. You have to strike it at the right angle with the right pressure, directing sparks into prepared tinder that's dry and finely shredded. Your first dozen attempts produce sparks that don't land into tinder. Your next dozen land, but don't catch. Finally, on attempt 27, you get a spark that lands perfectly on char cloth, which glows red and allows you to blow it into flame. The primitive methods are brutally difficult. The bow drill requires specific woods, specific technique, and an exhausting amount of effort that leaves your arms shaking and your hands blistered. You create smoke on your third hour of trying, which Sarah says is actually quite good for a first-timer. Creating actual fire takes until the next day.
But when you finally get an ember, when you carefully transfer it to your tinder bundle and blow gently until flames appear, the sense of accomplishment is overwhelming. You created fire without matches, without modern technology, using only materials from the forest and knowledge passed down through countless generations of humans. You're connected to something ancient, something fundamental about being human. The second day is water, finding it, purifying it, storing it. Sarah teaches you to read the landscape for signs of water, green vegetation in dry areas, insect activity, animal trails that converge, the sound of flowing water if you're patient and quiet enough to hear it. She teaches you multiple purification methods: boiling, the gold standard, chemical tablets, UV light devices, improvised filters using sand and charcoal, even solar water disinfection using clear bottles in sunlight. Each method has advantages and disadvantages, appropriate uses and limitations. You practice on water from the same creek where you got sick. Under Sarah's supervision, you boil it properly, rolling boil for 1 full minute, then letting it cool. You treat some with purification tablets, noting the chemical taste that's the price of safety. You build a crude filter from materials found in the forest. The water that made you sick was probably safe upstream, Sarah tells you. But between the source and where you drank, something contaminated it. Dead animal, animal feces, algae bloom, could have been anything. This is why you always treat water in the wilderness, even if it looks clean. Giardia is microscopic. You can't see it, can't taste it, can't smell it. By the time you know you have it, you're already sick. The third day is shelter. Real shelter, not the pathetic branch pile you constructed during your ordeal. Sarah teaches you to assess terrain for good shelter locations, protected from wind, off the ground to avoid ground cold, away from dead trees that might fall, near water, but not so close that humidity is a problem. You learn to build a debris hut, a proper one that actually traps heat and sheds water. The key is thickness. The debris layer needs to be at least 3 feet thick to provide adequate insulation. You learn about the importance of a bed layer, about creating a small interior space to maximize heat retention, about the proper angle for the roof to shed rain. You build your shelter slowly and carefully under Sarah's watchful eye. When it's finished, it looks like a small hill of leaves and branches, barely recognizable as a human structure. But when you crawl inside for testing, you're shocked by how much warmer it is than the outside air. The thick debris layer traps your body heat, creating a microclimate that makes survival possible even in freezing conditions. Your first shelter probably saved your life, Sarah tells you. It was inadequate, but it was something. You had the right instinct. You just didn't have the knowledge to execute it properly. Now you do. The fourth day is food. Foraging, trapping, fishing. Sarah's careful to emphasize that food is the lowest survival priority in short-term situations. You can survive 3 weeks without food, she reminds the group, but people get fixated on it,
because hunger is uncomfortable. Don't waste energy hunting and gathering when you should be focusing on shelter, water, and signaling for rescue. But she teaches you anyway, because sometimes rescue takes longer than 3 weeks. You learn to identify edible plants, cattails, dandelions, acorns, certain berries. You learn the universal edibility test for unknown plants, a careful process of skin contact, lip contact, tiny taste, small amount, and waiting periods to check for adverse reactions. You learn about poisonous lookalikes, about how some plants are edible only in certain seasons or after specific preparation. You learn to build simple traps and snares, though Sari is clear that trapping requires skills that take years to develop and luck that beginners rarely have. You learn basic fishing techniques using improvised hooks and line. You learn about insects as protein sources, trying to hide your disgust as Sarah calmly eats a grub and explains its nutritional value. The 5th day is navigation, finding your way without GPS or even a compass. Sarah teaches you to navigate by sun position during the day, by star positions at night, by moss patterns on trees, less reliable than folklore suggests, by the flow of water, by the lay of the land. You learn about maintaining direction of travel, about how easy it is to walk in circles when you don't have clear landmarks, about the importance of picking a destination and moving deliberately toward it rather than wandering randomly.
You practice with map and compass, learning to read topographic maps, to take bearings, to triangulate your position. Then, Sarah takes away your compass and makes you do it with improvised tools. A stick and shadow method to find true north, navigation by the sun's arc across the sky. The 6th day is signaling and rescue, how to make yourself visible and findable when help is searching. You learn about the rule of 3s for visual signals, 3 fires, 3 smoke columns, 3 reflected light flashes. You learn about ground-to-air signals, about using bright colors and geometric patterns that don't occur in nature, about the international distress signals that indicate help needed versus all okay. You practice with signal mirrors, learning to aim reflected sunlight accurately over long distances. You practice with whistles, which carry much farther than human voices with much less energy expenditure. You learn about when to stay put versus when to walk out, about leaving trail markers if you do move, about the psychology of remaining calm and rational when every instinct is screaming panic. The 7th and final day is the test. A solo night in the wilderness with only the clothes on your back and the knowledge in your head. You're dropped off at different locations within a safe zone that's monitored by instructors, but you don't know that. As far as you're concerned, you're alone. This time, it's different. You quickly assess your surroundings and identify resources. A small stream for water, dead wood for fire, good shelter locations. You gather firewood first, building a substantial pile before the sun gets low. You build a proper debris hut, taking your time to do it right, creating thick walls and a small interior space. You start a fire using the bow drill, and though it takes almost an hour, you get it without help. The flames feel like victory, like reclaiming power from an environment that once defeated you. You boil water from the stream, drinking deeply of water you know is safe. You find some cattails and harvest the edible parts, supplementing them with dandelion and greens. It's not a feast, but it's food you found and prepared yourself. As darkness falls, you sit by your fire outside your shelter, warm and secure in ways you weren't during your ordeal. The night sounds that terrified you before are still there. Animals moving through the forest, branches cracking, mysterious rustles in the undergrowth. But now, you understand them better, can identify some of them, know which ones are dangerous and which ones are just nature going about its business. You're not afraid this time. You're prepared. When Sarah and the other instructors find you in the morning, you're awake and alert, your fire still burning, your shelter intact. She smiles with genuine approval, not the patronizing pride of an adult praising a child, but the respect of one competent person acknowledging another. "You did good," she says simply. "You'd survive now. Maybe not comfortably, maybe not indefinitely, but you'd survive long enough for rescue to find you or for you to find your way out." That assessment, from someone who's seen hundreds of students and knows the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical ability, means more to you than any certificate or completion award. You're no longer the helpless person who nearly died alone in the woods. You're someone who knows how to survive. And that changes everything. The new normal. 3 months after the survival course, you're living a life that would be unrecognizable to the person you were before your wilderness ordeal. The changes are subtle, but fundamental. Shifts in perspective and priority that alter how you move through the world. You've lost weight, not from starvation this time, but from deliberate fitness training. You run now, not on treadmills, but on trails where the terrain is uneven and challenging. You hike every weekend with a weighted pack, building the kind of practical strength that translates to real-world capability rather than gym performance. Your apartment has changed too. You've cleared out clutter, keeping only things that serve a purpose. You have emergency supplies in every room: water, non-perishable food, first aid kits, flashlights with fresh batteries. Your car contains a complete survival kit with enough supplies to last 3 days in any environment. Your friends think you've become paranoid. Maybe they're right. But you've also become competent in ways they aren't, capable of handling situations they'd find overwhelming. You've started volunteering with search and rescue, using your newfound skills to help people who are lost in the wilderness the way you once were. It's meaningful work that connects you to something larger than yourself, that transforms your traumatic experience into a resource for helping others.
The nightmares have mostly faded, replaced by dreams that are still set in the wilderness, but no longer frightening. In these dreams, you're competent and prepared, moving through the forest with confidence, building fires and shelters and finding water. Sometimes Frank appears in these dreams, and sometimes Sarah, teaching you things or simply keeping you company. You've reconnected with Frank, visiting him several times at his home on the edge of the wilderness. He's become a mentor of sorts, teaching you things that don't come up in formal survival courses. The deep knowledge that comes from spending a lifetime in nature, reading weather patterns and animal behavior, and the subtle signs that distinguish safe situations from dangerous ones. Wilderness isn't the enemy, Frank tells you during one visit. It's just different. It has different rules than the city. Most people die in the wilderness because they try to apply city rules to a wilderness situation. They panic, they make bad decisions, they exhaust themselves fighting nature instead of working with it. You understand what he means now. The wilderness that nearly killed you wasn't malicious or cruel. It was simply being itself, following its own patterns and rhythms, indifferent to your survival in the same way it's indifferent to the survival of any organism that isn't adapted to its environment. Your relationship with modern conveniences has changed too. You appreciate them now in ways you never did before. The miracle of clean water from a tap, the luxury of climate control, the profound gift of abundant food. But you're also aware of how fragile these systems are, how dependent civilization is on infrastructure that most people never think about. When the power goes out during a storm, your neighbors panic and complain. You light candles, break out the camping stove, and feel a calm confidence that you could handle this situation indefinitely if necessary. You're not hoping for civilization to collapse, but you're no longer terrified of what would happen if it did. You've become the person people call when they're planning camping trips or outdoor adventures. They want to know what supplies to bring, what precautions to take, how to handle various scenarios that might arise. You're happy to help, to share the knowledge that was so painfully acquired, to maybe prevent someone else from experiencing what you went through. But you're also aware that knowledge isn't the same as experience. You can tell people how to build a fire, but until they've actually done it with cold hands and wet wood while darkness is falling, they won't fully understand. You could explain the importance of water purification, but until they've experienced Giardia, they won't truly appreciate why it matters. Some lessons can only be learned through suffering, and you've paid that tuition in full. Return to the forest. 6 months after your ordeal, you make a decision that surprises even yourself. You're going back to the place where you nearly died, not for a survival course or a guided tour, but alone, voluntarily, to face the wilderness that defeated you once before. Frank thinks you're crazy. He tells you you don't have anything to prove. You've got the skills now. You volunteer with SAR, you're helping people. Why risk going back? Sarah from the survival course is more understanding. She says some people need to return to the place that broke them, need to prove to themselves that they're different now, that the place that once seemed impossible is now manageable. Just be smart about it. Tell people where you're going, when you'll be back, what your route is. Bring proper supplies. Don't make the same mistakes twice. You follow her advice meticulously. You file a trip plan with local rangers, detailing your route and expected return time. You bring a GPS device with emergency beacon capability along with a fully charged phone. You pack a proper survival kit with redundant systems for every critical need. Multiple fire starting methods, water purification tablets and a filter, emergency shelter and sleeping bag, 3 days of food, plus fishing gear and knowledge of edible plants. You're not going out there to test your survival skills. You're going fully prepared with safety nets and backup plans. The goal isn't to prove you can survive with nothing you already know you barely can. The goal is to prove you can be comfortable and confident in an environment that once terrified you. The trailhead where your car was found 6 months ago looks different in autumn light. The trees are changing colors, painting the forest in shades of gold and red and orange. It's beautiful in a way you couldn't appreciate during your desperate attempt to survive.
You shoulder your pack, a proper hiking pack this time, fitted correctly and loaded with gear that has specific purposes, and start walking. Not randomly this time, but following a marked trail with clear purpose and direction. You know where you're going. To the creek where you drank contaminated water. To the ridge where you built your inadequate shelter. To the logging road where Frank found you dying. The hike takes 3 hours, but it's not the desperate stumbling march it was before. You move at a steady pace, taking breaks when needed, drinking treated water from your bottle, eating energy bars that actually taste good. Your body is stronger now, capable of carrying weight over distance without exhausting itself. When you reach the creek, you almost don't recognize it. It's the same water flowing over the same rocks, but your perspective has changed so completely that it might as well be a different place. You kneel beside it, filling your water bottle through your filter, watching clear water flow through the system that removes the microscopic threats you can't see. You drink deeply, gratefully, without fear. You find the spot where you built your first shelter, or at least you think you do. It's hard to tell. Nature has already reclaimed it, scattering the branches and absorbing the structure back into the forest floor. Nothing about it suggests that a terrified person once huddled here through the longest night of their life. You build another shelter in the same area, but this time you do it right. Proper debris hut, thick walls, small interior space, elevated bed layer. It takes 2 hours of focused work, and when you're done, you crawl inside to test it. It's warm, dry, and dark, a proper refuge that would actually keep you alive if the temperature dropped or a storm rolled in. You don't need this shelter. You have a tent and sleeping bag in your pack, but building it feels important, like replacing a bad memory with a good one, writing over failure with competence. Next, you build a fire, not because you need it, but because you can. Bow drill and tinder bundle, smoke and ember and gentle blowing until flames appear. You feed the fire carefully, building it up from tiny flames to a sustainable blaze that radiates warmth and light. You sit beside your fire as the sun sets, cooking a simple meal on a camping stove while the fire burns for comfort and psychological warmth. The forest grows dark around you, and the night sounds begin. The same sounds that once filled you with terror. But now you identify them. A deer moving through undergrowth, an owl calling in the distance, small rodents rustling in the leaves, the wind moving through branches. Nothing is trying to kill you. Everything is just living its life, following patterns and instincts that have nothing to do with you. You spend the night in your tent, not because you don't trust the shelter you built, but because the tent is more comfortable, and you've already proven what you needed to prove. You sleep deeply and peacefully, waking with the dawn feeling rested and calm. In the morning, you hike to the logging road where Frank found you. It looks mundane in daylight, just two dirt tracks cutting through the forest with nothing remarkable about it. But you know this unremarkable road was the boundary between life and death, the place where your desperate survival attempt was either going to end in rescue or failure. You stand in the middle of the road, exactly where Frank found you lying semi-conscious and hours from death. You try to remember what that felt like, the exhaustion, the dehydration, the sense of giving up. But it's already fading, becoming abstract, something that happened to a different version of you. The person who nearly died here was unprepared, ignorant, and unlucky. The person standing here now is trained, equipped, and capable. They're not the same person. Not really. The wilderness didn't just teach you survival skills, it forced you to become someone different, someone stronger, someone who respects the power of nature but isn't paralyzed by fear of it. You take a picture of the road, the forest, the exact spot where your life changed. Not because you want to remember the trauma, but because you want to document the transformation. This is where the old you ended and the new you began. Then you turn and hike out, following the marked trail back to your car. The journey that once seemed impossible now feels routine. You're not fighting the wilderness anymore. You're just walking through it, one step at a time, until you reach your destination. When you get to your car 6 hours later, you're tired but satisfied. You text Frank, "Made it back. You were right. I didn't need to do this, but I'm glad I did anyway." His response comes a few minutes later. "Proud of you, kid. Most people never face the thing that scared them. You not only faced it, you conquered it."
You're not sure conquest is the right word. The wilderness is still there, still powerful, still capable of killing unprepared people. You didn't conquer it so much as learn to coexist with it, to respect its rules while developing the skills to survive within its boundaries. But maybe that's what conquest looks like in the real world. Not domination, but competence. Not fearlessness, but the ability to act despite fear. You drive home as the sun sets, watching the wilderness recede in your rearview mirror. You'll be back, you know. Not because you need to prove anything else, but because you've discovered that you actually like it out there. The simplicity, the clarity, the direct relationship between action and consequence that doesn't exist in civilized life. The wilderness nearly killed you. But it also showed you who you really are, what you're capable of, and what matters when everything else is stripped away. And for that, you're grateful. Epilogue: The Gift. 1 year after your ordeal, you receive an unexpected package. It's from Sarah, your survival instructor, containing a letter and a small wooden box. The letter reads, "I've been teaching wilderness survival for 30 years, and I've learned to recognize the students who actually internalize the lessons versus the ones who treat it as a fun weekend activity. You're one of the rare ones who truly transformed, who took a traumatic experience and used it as fuel for growth rather than letting it break you. I'm proud of what you've become. You're competent, prepared, and most importantly, you respect the wilderness without fearing it. That's the balance most people never achieve. The box contains something I want you to have. It's been with me for 30 decades, through hundreds of trips into the backcountry, and it's saved my life more than once. I'm passing it to you now because I'm retiring, and I know it will be in good hands. Use it well. And maybe someday, when you're ready, pass it on to someone else who needs it. Sarah." Inside the box is a fire steel. Not a cheap commercial version, but a well-worn, obviously well-used tool that shows signs of countless fires started in countless situations. It's smooth where her hand gripped it for years, scored where the striker has left its marks, and there's something almost sacred about it. This is a tool that has kept someone alive for 30 years, and now it's yours. You hold it carefully, understanding the weight of what you've been given. This isn't just a piece of survival equipment. It's a legacy, a connection to a tradition of humans learning to survive in the wilderness, passing knowledge and tools from generation to generation. You add it to your personal survival kit, the one that goes everywhere with you, and you make a silent promise to Sarah and to yourself. You'll use it well, you'll honor what it represents, and someday, when you've earned the right through your own decades of experience, you'll pass it on to someone who needs it. The wilderness took something from you, that terrifying might, a year ago. Your innocence, your assumptions about safety, the comfortable ignorance of how fragile human life really is. But it also gave you something precious, the knowledge of your own capability, the confidence that comes from surviving something that could have killed you, and the deep appreciation for modern life that only comes from experiencing its absence. You're not the same person who woke up confused and alone on that forest floor. That person died in the cold night, succumbs to hypothermia, dehydration, and fear. The person who survived is someone new, forged by necessity and refined by education, capable of things the old you never imagined. And as you sit in your apartment, Sarah's fire steel in your hands, you feel something you didn't expect. Gratitude. Gratitude for Frank, who saved your life when he could have just driven past. Gratitude for Sarah, who taught you to transform trauma into capability. Gratitude for the wilderness itself, which showed you truths about existence that comfortable civilization obscures. You nearly died, alone in the forest. But in a very real sense, you were also born there. Transformed from someone who lived without understanding life's fragility into someone who knows exactly how thin the line is between survival and death, and who has the skills to stay on the right side of that line. The wilderness is still out there, vast and indifferent and dangerous, but you're not afraid of it anymore. You respect it, prepare for it, and maybe even love it a little bit for the lessons it taught you about who you really are when everything else is stripped away.
Tomorrow, you're leading your first survival workshop as an assistant instructor, helping a new group of students learn the skills that might save their lives someday. You'll teach them about fire and water and shelter, about staying calm and thinking clearly, about the difference between panic and productive action. But more than skills, you'll teach them respect. Respect for the wilderness, respect for their own limitations, and respect for the knowledge that's been passed down through countless generations of humans learning to survive in environments that weren't designed for their comfort. You'll tell them about your ordeal, about the mistakes you made and the lessons you learned. You'll show Sarah's fire steel and explain what it represents. You'll try to give them the gift that Frank gave you, the knowledge that survival is possible, that humans are more resilient than we think, and that the wilderness isn't an enemy to conquer, but a teacher whose lessons are harsh but valuable. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll see that transformation happen in someone else. That moment when a terrified student becomes a confident survivor, when vulnerability transforms into capability, when the wilderness stops being a threat and becomes simply a different kind of home. That's the real gift of your experience. Not just that you survived, but that you can now help others survive. Not just that you learned, but that you can now teach. The wilderness took a part of you that night, but it also gave you something back, a purpose, a calling, a way to transform your own suffering into service for others. And as you prepare for tomorrow's class, Sarah's fire steel carefully packed in your teaching kit, you realize that you wouldn't change what happened to you, even if you could. Because the person you've become, the life you're now living, the purpose you've found, none of it would exist without that terrifying night in the wilderness. You nearly died alone in the forest, but in the end, the wilderness didn't take your life. It gave you a new one. Sleep well, survivors. And remember, the wilderness is always there, waiting to teach those brave enough to learn its lessons. The question is, will you be ready when your turn comes? Until next time, this is Sleepless Survivors, reminding you that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about becoming someone stronger, wiser, and more capable than you were before. Stay safe out there, and always, always respect the wilderness. Search for water. 3 hours of walking, and you're already learning the first cruel lesson of wilderness survival. Everything takes longer and costs more energy than you expect. What looked like that way from your starting point has become a maze of obstacles. Fallen trees force detours. Dense thickets of thorny bushes create impassable barriers. The flat ground you saw from a distance reveals itself to be a series of small ravines and hills that exhaust your untrained legs. Your sneakers, perfect for walking on sidewalks, provide almost no support on uneven terrain dotted with roots and rocks. You've fallen twice. The first time you caught yourself with your hands, scraping your palm on rough bark and dirt. The second time, your knee took the impact, tearing your jeans and drawing blood. Both wounds are minor by modern standards. You'd barely notice them in normal life. But here, without antiseptic or bandages, every injury is a potential crisis. Infection in the wilderness isn't an inconvenience, it's a death sentence delivered slowly. Your t-shirt is soaked with sweat, despite the cool air. You're thirsty, genuinely thirsty, in a way you haven't experienced since that one time you tried running a 5K without training. Your mouth is dry, your lips are starting to chafe, and you'd give anything for the water bottle that's sitting on your kitchen counter at home. But you're looking for water with new urgency now. Not because you want it, but because you need it. Dehydration kills faster than starvation, and your body is already demanding replacement for the fluids you've sweated out during your morning hike through terrain that refuses to cooperate. The problem is, you don't actually know how to find water in the wilderness. The advice you've absorbed from random YouTube videos and half-remembered survival shows is vague and contradictory. Follow animal trails? You haven't seen any animals, and even if you had, I'm not sure you could distinguish a trail from random gaps in the underbrush. Listen for the sound of running water. The forest is full of sounds: wind, birds, your own breathing, and none of them sound like a stream. Look for greener vegetation. That's another tip. But everything is green here. Overwhelmingly, uniformly, endlessly green. Some plants are darker green, some are lighter green, some are yellow-green, and some are blue-green, but none of them are wearing signs that say, "Water this way."
You make another decision. Go downhill. Water flows downward, so low points in the landscape should have streams, or at least damp soil where water collects. It's logical, it makes sense, and it's possibly the first genuinely useful thought you've had since waking up. The descent is harder than you anticipated. Gravity helps, but it also makes it difficult to control your speed. You slip and slide, grabbing at trees to slow yourself, leaving more scrapes on your hands that sting and bleed slightly. Your knee, already injured from the earlier fall, protests with each jarring step. And then you hear it. Not the robust rush of a river or even the cheerful babble of a stream, but a faint trickling sound that makes your heart leap with hope. You push through a particularly dense section of undergrowth, getting tangled in vines and probably poison ivy or poison oak or some other plant that will make you regret this later. And there it is. A tiny creek, barely wider than your hand, flowing over moss-covered rocks. The water is clear, and in your desperate state, it looks like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. You drop to your knees beside it, ready to plunge your face in and drink until your stomach hurts, but something makes you pause. Some half-remembered warning about wilderness water, parasites, bacteria, things with names like Giardia and Cryptosporidium that can make you violently ill. The water looks clean. It's moving, which is supposed to be good. You're upstream, away from any obvious source of contamination, but you don't know what's upstream from here. Could be a dead animal decomposing in the water. Could be bacteria thriving in the cool, shaded environment. Could be perfectly safe. Or could be a pathogen bomb waiting to destroy your digestive system. You're faced with a decision, then has no good answer. Drink the water and risk severe illness, or don't drink and definitely face dehydration. Severe diarrhea and vomiting in the wilderness without access to clean water or medical care could kill you. But guaranteed dehydration will definitely kill you. The survival calculation is brutal in its simplicity. Possible death versus certain death. You choose possible. You cup your hands in the stream and bring water to your mouth. It's cold, almost shockingly cold, and tastes of minerals and earth and something organic you can't quite identify. You tell yourself it's just the taste of nature, of water that hasn't been filtered and chlorinated and processed through municipal systems. You drink deeply, desperately, feeling the water fill your stomach and start to ease the desperate thirst that's been building. It tastes like victory and danger in equal measure. You drink until your stomach is uncomfortable, knowing that you need to hydrate now while you have access to water. You don't know when you'll find it again, and your body needs fluids to function, to think clearly, to regulate temperature, to do all the thousands of automatic processes that keep you alive. As you sit back on your heels, water dripping from your chin, you notice something that makes your brief moment of triumph evaporate. The sun has passed its peak, starting its descent toward the horizon. You've spent most of the day searching for water, and soon you'll need to address the next survival priority: shelter. Because night is coming, and you're going to be alone in the dark with no protection from whatever moves through these woods when the sun goes down. Building shelter. You have perhaps 3 hours of usable daylight left when you begin to think seriously about shelter. The temperature is already dropping as the sun sinks lower, shadows lengthening across the forest floor. You're still near the creek, and that seems as good a place as any to establish your first camp. The problem is that you've never built a shelter in your life. You've seen it done on TV, watched survival experts construct elaborate lean-tos and debris huts that look cozy and weatherproof. But watching someone do something and actually doing it yourself are separated by a gap wider than the wilderness you're currently lost in. You start with fallen branches, pulling them from the undergrowth and trying to arrange them against a large fallen log. The goal, as you understand it, is to create a triangular space that will protect you from wind and rain and, hopefully, trap some of your body heat. The branches don't cooperate. They're too short, or too brittle, or too heavy to prop at the angle you need. They fall when you try to lean them together. They roll away when you try to secure them. The log you chose as your main support has a curve that makes everything tilt the wrong way. You're working up a sweat again, despite the cooling air, frustrated by the gap between your theoretical knowledge and practical ability. Every movement reveals your complete lack of experience with manual labor that doesn't involve a keyboard or a steering wheel.
After an hour of increasingly desperate effort, you've created something that might charitably be called a shelter, if you squint and use your imagination. It's a rough triangle of branches leaned against a fallen log, with smaller branches and ferns woven between them in a haphazard attempt at creating walls. It has gaps you could stick your fist through. Rain would pour through it like it's not even there. Wind will howl through the openings and steal what little body heat you can generate. But it's something. It's a space that's yours, a tiny island of human effort in an ocean of indifferent wilderness. You gather armfuls of dead leaves and pine needles to line the floor, creating a layer between you and the cold ground. You've read that ground cold is one of the fastest ways to lose body heat, that you need insulation below you even more than above you. The leaves are damp and smell of decay, but they're better than sleeping directly on the earth. You collect more branches and ferns to pile on top of your structure, trying to create thicker walls that might actually provide some protection. Your hands are scratched and bleeding from rough bark and thorns. Your arms ache from lifting and carrying. Your knees hurt from kneeling on rocks and roots. The sun is touching the horizon now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would be beautiful if they weren't a countdown to darkness. You make several more trips to gather firewood. Every survival instinct you have is screaming that you need fire, that fire means warmth and light and protection and cooking and psychological comfort in an uncomfortable situation. The problem is that you have no way to start a fire. No matches, no lighter, no flint and steel, no bow drill, no hand drill, no knowledge of friction-based fire starting beyond vague concepts absorbed from TV. You try rubbing sticks together, feeling ridiculous even as you do it, knowing that fire by friction requires specific techniques and materials and practice you don't have. You try to remember if you've seen any flint in the rocks you've passed. You try to imagine using your phone battery to start a fire, but you have no idea how that would work, and you're not willing to sacrifice your last link to civilization on an experiment that will probably just destroy your phone without producing fire. The sun drops below the horizon with shocking speed. Twilight in the wilderness is brief, a short grace period between day and night. The temperature plummets as heat radiates away into a clear sky. You can see your breath now, small clouds of condensation that disappear into the gathering darkness. You crawl into your shelter, pulling branches across the opening to create a barrier between yourself and the night. You're wearing all the clothes you have, jeans, t-shirt, sneakers with no socks, because you were apparently living your normal life when whatever happened to bring you here occurred. It's not enough, not nearly enough for a night in the wilderness where temperatures can drop to near freezing even in moderate climates. You curl into a ball, trying to minimize your surface area, trying to trap whatever body heat you can generate. The pile of leaves and pine needles provide some insulation from the ground, but dampness seeps through them, drawing heat from your body with relentless efficiency. And then the night sounds begin. Things move in the darkness beyond your shelter. You hear branches snapping, leaves rustling, sounds that could be animals or wind or your terrified imagination. Something howls in the distance. A coyote maybe, or a wolf, or something you can't identify. Another sound answers it, creating a chorus of predatory voices that make your primitive hindbrain light up with terror. You're shivering now. Violent tremors that shake your whole body as hypothermia begins to set in. You know that shivering is actually good? It means your body is still trying to generate heat, still fighting to keep your core temperature stable. When the shivering stops, that's when you're in real danger. But knowing that doesn't make it any less miserable. You're colder than you've ever been, alone in a darkness more complete than you've experienced in your electricity-lit life, listening to sounds that speak of teeth and claws and things that hunt by night. You check your phone, 32% battery now, and the light from the screen feels like a lifeline. You consider using it as a flashlight, pointing it out through the gaps in your shelter to see what's making those sounds. But every second you have it on is battery life you're burning. And once it's gone forever. You turn it off and return to darkness so absolute you can't see a hand in front of your face. The night stretches ahead of you, hours and hours before dawn. You're not sure you'll survive it. You're not sure you want to, if survival means many more nights like this one.
Storytelling. This is only day 1, and already you're broken. Dawn and dehydration. You're not sure if you slept or just existed in a state between consciousness and hypothermic shutdown. The night was an eternity of shivering, strange sounds, and moments of panic when something moved very close to your shelter. So close you could hear breathing that wasn't your own. But you survived. When the first gray light of dawn seeps through the branches of your shelter, you're still alive, still human, still capable of thought, beyond the basic repetition of cold, cold, cold. That occupied most of the night. You crawl out of your shelter, stiff and aching. Every muscle protests movement. Your hands are swollen and scratched, your knee is painful where you injured it yesterday, and your body temperature is dangerously low. You're shaking so hard you can barely stand, but you force yourself up because staying still means continuing to lose heat to the ground. The forest in morning light looks different, softer, less threatening, almost beautiful in a way you're too miserable to appreciate. Mist rises from the creek, creating ghostly shapes that drift between the trees. Birds are singing, oblivious to your suffering, going about their business of being alive in the wilderness that is their home and your prison. You stumble to the creek and drink again, this time more carefully, scooping water with cupped hands that shake so badly you spill more than you swallow. The cold water hurts going down, but your body desperately needs it. You've lost fluids through the night, sweat from shivering, moisture from breathing, water used in the basic metabolic processes that kept you from dying. Your stomach feels wrong, crampy, unsettled, making sounds that aren't normal. You don't know if it's from the untreated water you drank yesterday, from stress, from hunger, or from the general trauma your body is experiencing. Whatever the cause, it's not good. You try to think through your priorities for day 2 with a brain that feels foggy and slow. Shelter. You have something that barely qualifies, but it needs improvement if you're going to survive another night. Water. You have access, but it might be making you sick. Food. You haven't eaten in approximately 36 hours and your body is starting to really notice. Fire. You still desperately need it, but have no way to create it. Rescue. No plan, no signal, no hope of someone finding you unless you do something active. The most logical action is to follow the creek downstream.
Water leads to larger bodies of water, and humans build settlements near water. If you follow it far enough, eventually you should reach some sign of civilization. A trail, a road, a cabin, anything that indicates you're not the only human in this wilderness. But you're weak, cold, and potentially getting sick from contaminated water. Every hour you spend walking is energy you're expending from reserves that are already depleted. If you walk in the wrong direction, you could be using your last strength to move further from help. You make the decision to follow the creek. Staying put hasn't brought rescue, and at least movement gives you the illusion of control, the sense that you're doing something to save yourself rather than passively waiting to die. You salvage what you can from your shelter. Nothing useful, really, just the knowledge of how to build something slightly more effective next time. You take one more long drink from the creek, knowing that you're gambling with your health every time you do this, but having no alternative. Then you start walking downstream, following the creek as it winds through the forest, stepping carefully on the slippery rocks along its bank. The morning passes in a blur of exhaustion and determination. Your stomach cramps worsen, and twice you have to stop and crouch in the bushes as your digestive system violently rejects the water you've been drinking. Each episode leaves you weaker, more dehydrated despite having access to water, more vulnerable to the feedback loop where illness prevents you from effectively addressing the causes of that illness. You're experiencing giardia, though you don't know that specifically. You just know that something is very wrong, that your body is fighting a battle it's losing, and that the water you need to survive is poisoning you from the inside. Around noon, when the sun is high and you're sweating despite the cool temperature, you hear something that makes your heart race with hope. Human sounds. Not voices, exactly, but mechanical noise. The distant hum of an engine. Metal on metal. Something that doesn't belong in the wilderness.
You change direction, abandoning the creek to move toward the sound. You're climbing now, struggling up a slope that seems impossibly steep in your weakened state. Your vision is starting to blur at the edges, dark spots that come and go. You know these are signs of serious dehydration, of electrolyte imbalance, of a body beginning to shut down. But you keep climbing because that sound means people, and people mean rescue. And rescue means this nightmare can end. You reach the top of the ridge and see it. A logging road, 2 parallel tracks of dirt cutting through the forest. It's empty, no vehicles in sight, and the sound you heard has faded into silence. But it's a road, a human-made path, the first sign of civilization you've encountered. You want to cry with relief, but you don't have enough water in your body for tears. You stagger onto the road and sit down in the middle of it, too exhausted to stand, too weak to care about the possibility of a vehicle actually coming. If a truck appears, you'll wave it down. If no truck appears, at least you're on a road instead of wandering randomly through endless forest. Your phone shows 18% battery. You turn it on, hoping desperately for a signal now that you're in an open area. 1 bar appears, flickers, disappears. You try to send a text, help, lost, need rescue, to your emergency contacts, but it doesn't go through. The message sits in your outbox, mocking you with its proximity to success. You try calling 911. The call attempts to connect, plays a single ringtone, then drops. No service. Almost, but not quite enough to actually communicate with the outside world. You're lying on the road now, too tired to sit up anymore. The sun is warm on your face, pleasant in contrast to the cold night you endured. You think about sleep, about how nice it would be to just close your eyes for a while and rest. Some dim survival instinct warns you that falling asleep here, in this condition, might mean not waking up, but you're so tired, so incredibly, impossibly tired. Your eyes close despite your best intentions, and the wilderness takes another piece of you. The gift of fire. You wake to pain. Someone is shaking your shoulder, speaking words that your confused brain struggles to process as language.
You try to push them away, to return to the peaceful darkness of unconsciousness, but they persist. Hey, wake up! Can you hear me? You force your eyes open and see a face hovering over you, weathered and sun-worn, framed by a gray beard and concerned eyes. An old man, maybe 60 or 70, wearing flannel and a work vest covered in pockets. "There you are," he says with relief in his voice. "Thought you might be dead. What the hell are you doing sleeping in the middle of a logging road?" You try to answer, but your mouth is too dry, your tongue thick and uncooperative. You manage something that might be lost or might just be a groan. The man, your savior, your miracle, seems to understand. He pulls a metal water bottle from his vest and holds it to your lips. Slow sips, not too fast, or you'll throw it up. The water is clean, filtered, the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. You want to grab the bottle and chug the entire thing, but he controls the flow, making you take small sips that your rebellious stomach can hopefully handle. "Name's Frank," he says while you drink. "I'm doing maintenance on logging equipment up the road. Lucky for you, I decided to walk back to my truck instead of taking the ATV. How long you been out here?" 2 days. No supplies. Got sick from the water?" Frank's expression darkens. "Giardia, probably. Common in these woods. You need electrolytes and antibiotics, ideally, and about a gallon of clean water. My truck's half a mile back. Think you can walk if I help you?" You're not sure, but you're not anyway. The alternative is staying here. And staying here means dying on a logging road that sees traffic maybe once a week. Frank hauls you to your feet with surprising strength for his age, and you lean heavily on him as you walk. The half mile takes almost an hour. You have to stop repeatedly to let waves of cramping and nausea pass, to catch your breath, to convince your legs to keep moving. Frank is patient, telling you stories about his 40 years working in these woods, about other people he's found who got lost or injured or simply underestimated the wilderness. Nature doesn't care about your plans, doesn't care if you're smart or dumb, prepared or unprepared. You respect it or it kills you. Simple as that. His truck is an old Ford, battered and mud-splattered, the most beautiful vehicle you've ever seen. He helps you into the passenger seat, cranks the heat up high, and gives you more water mixed with what he calls electrolyte powder that tastes like slightly salty artificial fruit.
Nearest hospital is 2 hours from here, Frank says, starting the engine. But there's a ranger station about 40 minutes out. They've got medical supplies. Can call for an airlift if you need it. How's your stomach feeling? Awful. Everything I drink, You trail off, embarrassed. Nothing to be ashamed of. Giardia is nasty business. Gives you the runs, cramps, dehydrates you, even while you're trying to hydrate. Seen people lose 20 pounds in a week from it. Seen one guy who almost died because he kept drinking from the same contaminated source. The truck bounces along the logging road, and despite your discomfort, you feel hope for the first time since this nightmare began. You're going to survive, thanks to sheer luck and an old man who happened to walk instead of ride. You're going to make it out of this wilderness. But Frank isn't done teaching you lessons. As he drives, he talks about wilderness survival, about the mistakes he's seen people make, the simple knowledge that separates life from death in environments like this. Fire, he says, is everything out here. Warmth, water purification, signaling for rescue, cooking, psychological comfort. You said you couldn't make fire? You nod, feeling foolish. Fire's not hard if you know how. Matches and lighters are best, sure, but even without those, you've got options. Battery and steel wool makes flames in seconds. Bow drill, if you practiced. Even your phone battery, if you're desperate enough. I didn't want to break my phone. Frank laughs, but not unkindly. Your phone versus your life. Easy math. Survival isn't about saving your stuff. It's about saving yourself. Everything else is just things. The ranger station appears, like a mirage made real. A solid building with a parking lot and a flagpole, and all the mundane symbols of human civilization.
Two rangers emerge as Frank parks, their faces showing concern at your condition. What follows is a blur of activity. Questions about your symptoms, where you've been, what you've consumed, an IV to address your dehydration, antibiotics for the Giardia infection, a warm blanket and hot soup that your stomach barely tolerates, phone calls to authorities, to your family, to search and rescue teams that had been preparing to look for you if you didn't turn up soon. Apparently, you'd been reported missing when you didn't show up for work. Apparently, your car was found abandoned at a trailhead with no sign of which direction you had gone. Apparently, they'd been about to start a full-scale search operation. You'd been closer to rescue than you realized, just a few miles from trails that are regularly patrolled. If you'd walked in a slightly different direction, if you'd climbed one more ridge, if you'd made a dozen different choices, you might have found help on day 1 instead of nearly dying on day 2. That's the reality of wilderness survival. Success and failure separated by tiny margins, luck playing as big a role as skill, and the outcome often determined by factors you can't control or predict. Recovery and reflection. 3 days later, you're in a hospital bed receiving IV antibiotics and being monitored for complications from your brief wilderness ordeal. The Giardia infection was severe enough to require medical intervention. You lost 8 pounds in 2 days, became dangerously dehydrated, and came closer to organ failure than the doctors like to admit. Your family has visited, oscillating between relief that you're alive and anger that you somehow managed to get lost in the first place. The details of how you ended up alone in the wilderness are still fuzzy. A solo hike that went wrong, a wrong turn on an unmarked trail, a series of small mistakes that added up to a life-threatening situation. But the physical recovery is easier than the psychological one. You have nightmares now. Dreams where you're back in that shelter, shivering through endless night while sounds move in the darkness. You wake up gasping, convinced for a moment that you're still trapped, still alone, still dying by degrees in a forest that doesn't care whether you survive. The doctors say this is normal. Post-traumatic stress from a survival situation, your brain processing the trauma by replaying it during sleep. They assure you it will fade with time, that the nightmares will become less frequent, that eventually you'll be able to think about those 2 days without your heart racing and your palms sweating. But you're not sure you want to forget, because along with the trauma came lessons that feel important, fundamental, like truths about existence that most people never have to learn.
You learn that humans are fragile, not in an abstract way, but viscerally, personally. You learn that the infrastructure of modern life, electricity, running water, grocery stores, emergency services, isn't a default state of existence. It's a miracle of coordination and engineering that most of us take for granted until it's suddenly gone. You learn that nature is beautiful and terrible in equal measure. The same force that almost killed you with cold and contaminated water was also sustaining thousands of life forms, perfectly adapted to its challenges. You were the intruder there, the organism out of its proper environment, as helpless as a fish on land. You learned about your own limitations. You weren't as smart or capable or resourceful as you'd always assumed. When faced with actual survival challenges, most of your knowledge was useless trivia. Your skills were urban-focused and wilderness irrelevant, and your physical conditioning was woefully inadequate for the demands of living without modern conveniences. But you also learned about human resilience. You survived 2 days that you didn't think you'd survive. You kept making decisions, kept trying solutions, kept moving forward even when every instinct screamed to give up. You built shelter with no experience, found water despite having no training, and endured a night that felt like it might kill you. Frank visits you on the 4th day, bringing a gift that makes you laugh and cry simultaneously, a survival kit in a waterproof case. Inside is everything you desperately needed during your ordeal. Waterproof matches, a fire starter, water purification tablets, a basic first aid kit, a knife, paracord, an emergency blanket, and a detailed guide to wilderness survival. "Don't want to see you on a logging road again," he says with a grin, "but if I do, want you to be better prepared." You thank him, inadequately, because how do you properly thank someone for saving your life? He waves it off, says he was just doing what any decent person would do, that helping people is part of the unwritten code of wilderness workers. But you know it was more than that. He didn't have to stop for what could have been a drunk sleeping off a bender. He didn't have to spend an hour helping you walk to his truck. He didn't have to take time out of his day to drive you to help instead of just calling it in and going back to work. He chose to help because somewhere in his 60 years of life, he'd learned that human beings are supposed to take care of each other, especially when one of them is vulnerable and alone and facing death. The survival kit sits on your bedside table now, a tangible reminder of your ordeal and your rescue. You open it sometimes, examining each item, reading the survival guide, learning the skills you should have known before you needed them. You're planning to take a wilderness survival course once you're recovered. Want to learn how to start fires without matches, how to identify safe water sources, how to build proper shelters, how to navigate without GPS. You're going to train your body too, build up the strength and endurance that city living has leached away. Because here's what you learned most importantly. You never want to feel that helpless again. Never want to be in a situation where your survival depends entirely on luck and the kindness of strangers. You want to be the person who knows what to do, who has the skills and tools and knowledge to not just survive, but to help others survive. The wilderness taught you that you're not as capable as you thought, and now you're determined to become more capable than you ever imagined.